Einen wunderschönen guten Abend, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren. Es ist Dienstagabend, es ist 19 Uhr und Sie sind an der richtigen Stelle. Sie sind bei den CRM Conversations und wie wir das so geplant haben, haben wir einen Gast diesmal aus dem Vereinigten Königreich. John Patterson, den ich heute recht herzlich willkommen heiße, hat auch noch das Privileg gehabt, er war mal mein oberster Boss. Ob er das Privileg genauso genießen konnte wie ich, das werden wir dann gleich auch mal in Englisch haben. Denn haben wir eine. Ups, da war dann auch schon mal der Test, ob wir auch in anderen Medien präsent sind. Wir sind präsent, das haben Sie gehört. Und jetzt switche ich rüber nach der guten englischen Sprache. John, it is a pleasure to have you with us. And we are honored. And as my former boss, you might have had through Detail and others several challenges with me as let's say, a very vivid marketing-driven chap. I'm very grateful that you are now in a completely different arena, no longer financials, but CRM. And we met at Systems Union, where you were the COO at that time. It was the first time that I learned what a COO is, and I knew that you were, wow, busy, yeah, with Pembo in the back. Now, this is about the history. Now I would like to take it over to you, that you have a fair chance to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you all for inviting me to this broadcast today. Yeah, Systems Union, happy days. That was a real, that's where I grew up really, at Systems Union. I joined Systems Union as their first salesperson, having never sold anything before in my life. But then they'd never hired a salesperson either. So I bluffed my way into the job. And there were 5 of us working in a basement. And in over 15 years, we grew that company to $100 million revenue, and like 500 staff in 23 different offices. And it was a great ride. We were all quite young. We were all learning as we were going. We hadn't worked for any other companies that had ever done this before. We made lots of mistakes. We learned quickly from them. Yep. And it was really good fun, really good fun. And you know, every year was a record year. Yeah, happy days.
And then came even more happy days, such as you found your own business.
Yes, well, I left Systems Union and found myself doing a series of what I call turnarounds, venture capital-backed turnarounds.
Yeah.
So the first one wasn't really supposed to be that. So I joined a company which was a CRM company, which leads us a bit later on to why I'm here, called Oxygen Solutions. And they were a specialist CRM vendor that sold into the financial and pharmaceutical marketplaces. Both of those industries, particularly pharmaceutical, had very specific requirements for what a CRM system should do. And I joined that company. It had been started by 3 people. They'd done very well. They'd grown it from nothing themselves. They'd raised a couple of rounds of venture capital money. There were about 80 of them, I think, when I joined. And it was all going extremely well, and revenue was growing well. And they wanted somebody who'd done it before to join them and grow their company up to the next stage. You know, that standard line, which is, well done, you guys, you've got it to this stage. Now we're going to get somebody in a little older and more experienced to take it to the next stage. So that was fun. But when I actually arrived there after about 2 weeks, I realized that we actually had a revenue recognition problem in the company. And that whereas everybody had thought that the company's revenue had grown last year, in fact, it had actually shrunk. but the cost base had grown and we were now losing money and things were not as everybody thought. So that was my first experience of, whoops, suddenly actually, instead of trying to grow this company, we had to do a turnaround. We actually have expenses higher than our revenue, and we're burning cash, and we need to do something about this. So yes,
pretty dire.
Yeah, everybody was very surprised, myself and the investors as well, obviously. So so that was my first experience of doing a turnaround. So we did actually turn that around. And we sold the company after 18 months to another company that wanted to buy us. And after we'd sold it, obviously, I then moved on. And I joined another company, which was an e-learning company, which was a bit of a turnaround. And then finally, I stayed a short time with, and then I joined another company called Zeus Technology that made internet infrastructure, particularly the Zeus web server. And that was a turnaround in that, you know, they were burning 100,000 a month in cash and $1 million in the bank, so you've got 10 months. And so I sort of found myself, well, after you've done a couple of turnarounds, you get a reputation for doing turnarounds, and then all the job offers that you get are turnarounds. And it can be profitable for the CEO to do a turnaround. You get paid lots of money, particularly if you manage to turn it around and sell it. But it's a really miserable experience. I reckon that most turnarounds take 3 years, and the first 2 years are absolutely painful. Mm-hmm. And in the last year, you have fun. And then you start all over again. You have 2 painful years and 1 year of have fun. And I thought that this is not a great lifestyle.
I should think not.
You get paid well if it works, but you're the piggy in the middle. You've got the staff are really, really unhappy, mainly because you're firing lots of them. The investors are really unhappy because they dump lots of money into this company and they can see themselves losing it, and they're all not being paid their bonuses. And you're the CEO, you're in the middle, you're trying to keep all these people as happy as you can, and at the same time trying to salvage the business. So so I left Zeus Technology at the end of that process and wondered what to do next, and decided that what I wanted to do next was not another turnaround. And what I wanted to do next was what we did at Systems Union, where every day was a happy day and the revenue went up every month and everybody had smiling faces, and it was just a really nice experience. So I decided to start my own company and try and replicate that experience, which is a bootstrapped software company that sold software that people wanted and had nice customers and good customer support. Every customer was a happy customer, and all the people who worked in the company were happy people. And I looked around to see what I could do to start such a business. I looked outside the software business as well, because I thought, you know, I've done software all my life, maybe I should do something else. But in the end, I decided that if it was going to have a chance of working, I really ought to stick to what I knew, which was software and solution sales. And I looked around at various application areas, and cloud CRM was very, very new. I think Salesforce was just around in those days. And I thought, well, you know, I understand CRM systems because I've used them all my life, and I've run a CRM company. And I understand the technology, I understand cloud technology. And I thought that there could be a much simpler version than Salesforce. It's pretty well the only show in town at that stage. And it was just becoming to be big and complicated, and since then it's got much, much bigger and much, much more complicated. So I thought there was an entrance for a lightweight CRM system that was cloud-based. So we started it. When I was thinking of starting it, I went round and talked to all my friends and ex-colleagues, about what I was doing and what their requirements would be, whether they used a CRM system and what they would need in a CRM system if they were to purchase one, particularly if they purchased one from me. And everybody that you talked to said the same thing. They all said, look, our needs are really, really simple. We don't do anything complicated. We have customers, we have contacts, we have opportunities. We need to call back people on a certain day. It's not complicated. It's really, really simple what we do. So I thought, well, that's a good name for a company. Called it Really Simple Systems.
You said something quite interesting right in the beginning.
I hope I've said more than one thing, but that's interesting because I've been talking for about 10 minutes.
What you said is you want to sell what customers want. So how
that's always a good process.
Yeah. How to determine that?
Well, two things. First of all, my own experience in using CRM systems way before they were called CRM systems. I think my first experience was probably a little DBase application that I knocked up on the first couple of weeks I was at Systems Union.
Mm-hmm.
And then within Systems Union, we rolled out various CRM systems. One, the first of which actually I think I wrote myself. It's called Flex, if you remember that, Ralph.
Yep.
Or maybe that was just in the UK. And again, just simple stuff. And then we rolled out more and more complicated systems with different levels of success. Trying to roll out a global system before there was the internet, where everything was synchronized across 23 offices. That was quite complicated. Getting different people in different countries with different levels of enthusiasm to try and use the corporate system that was being foisted upon them from head office, i.e. me. So all that experience, I could see there were two things. There's the technology challenge of how do you lay out the data and what functionality that you have and how many mandatory fields are you going to force these poor people to fill in. And then there was the psychological issue of motivating people to use the CRM system. And it became evident, even in a group of, say, 10 salespeople, you'll have 2 or 3 that just love this system. It's great, it's fantastic. They're the kind of people that are very organized. They were organized anyway. Now you've given them a better way to be organized. They love it. They use it all the time. They see the benefits. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. And then you'll get, at the other extreme, you'll get the classical sales guy. This is the guy that always parks his car in the director's car space. He never files his expenses in on time. You have no visibility of what his pipeline is. He keeps all his contacts in his personal file packs and will not share them with anybody. You never know when the deal is closed until it's closed. They have gold cufflinks normally, and they drive a flash car, and they don't like having a CRM system because that's not the way that they work. They work by taking people out to drinks and taking people out to lunch. And they don't really want their managers, and certainly not anybody else, having visibility of what the hell they're doing, especially not losing deals. And also when they leave, they want to take their prospect, their pipeline with them. They don't want to be cut off from the corporate system and lose all their data.
Right, you don't want your customers to become community property.
Exactly, so you'd answer who owns the customer? Well, those salespeople think they own the customer, not the company. So you get this range of people who you're going to try and persuade to use your CRM system. So you need a balance of carrots and stick to get this system to work. So you need the basic system, which has got to work and it's got to have a basic level of functionality. And then you need to overcome the obstacles of getting people to actually use the CRM system. So when I started the company, I wrote a white paper about this. And in all my experience in rolling out CRM systems, the biggest challenge was getting people to use it, getting everybody to use it. And so how do you actually achieve that? Well, you have to have a system that works to start with. When I was at Oxygen, this was pre-internet, so everything had to synchronize. if you remember those days. So the salespeople were out on the road, they had their laptop, they visited all the customers, they religiously typed up all their notes because you told them to type up their notes, they write up their call notes and they moved their opportunities and they adjusted this, and then they got back home and they plugged it into their modem and hit the synchronization button, and it says synchronization has failed, all your data is corrupted.
And then they were really happy.
And then they threw the laptop in the bin. And was sure that there's nothing
different fighting our system.
So the technology has to work is job one. And the internet made that obviously a lot easier because you don't have the synchronization problem. Then the other thing that you have to avoid is once you have lots of people using the CRM system, and particularly once you get the marketing people involved, they start wanting to collect an awful lot of data that they would find very useful, but unfortunately nobody else will. And they start setting up lots of fields in the CRM system about where the source is and which campaign it was. And then they find the salespeople aren't filling them in because the salespeople either don't know or don't care. So the marketing people make them mandatory. You have to fill them in. Then the salespeople don't fill anything in at all. They just click the first option on the screen because they don't know the answer and it won't let me save the page otherwise. So these are all reasons why people won't use CRM systems. If you make it too complicated or it's unreliable, then if you're of a mind that you didn't really want to use it in the first place, then you're going to find yourself with lots of good reasons as not to continue it anymore.
What did you do to make it simple?
So first of all, you just have very simple UE, page designs, and then you you try to make it as easy as possible. First of all, by having the minimal amount of data that you put in, and then having lots of sort of nice little features that just make it easy to use. Like if you complete a task, it turns itself into an activity immediately. Data is copied from one part of the system to the other automatically. You create an opportunity under an account, then it will copy all the data from the account automatically for that opportunity. You don't need to type it in again. And it'll make sensible decisions for you. As for the data, as it goes along, email synchronization has to be really painless, just has to work. The report designer has to be really easy to use. When I wrote the first version I wrote myself, I haven't mentioned that. When I wrote the first version of the report writer, the sales report writer, the specification was this report writer has to be so easy to use that even a sales director could use it.
Yeah, true.
So that was a challenge. But generally speaking, when I rolled it out, people said, yes, this is really easy to use. The danger afterwards, of course, is that people will take a system that was really easy to use and they'll set it up with the minimal amount of fields. But then after a while, it will become more complicated as people add more fields onto the system. Again, so say particularly the marketing people. The advantages and disadvantages of having a system that has marketing integrated into it rather than in a separate system. So we encourage our customers that, once a year to have a CRM spring clean, go through the system that they've set up. They've got all these extra fields throughout the system. Do you really need them? Can you get rid of them? Do you really need the information that you collected from your user conference 2 years ago still on the system? Probably not. Get rid of the fields, hide them, make them only available to the marketing people. Just try and keep it clean all the time. Because the existing salespeople will be okay, because they've started with a simple sales system, and the more fields have been added, but they've got used to them now, and they're used to the system, and they're fine with that. But when a new salesperson arrives and they're confronted with this CRM system that has 50 fields on it, on the accounts page, then their eyes begin to glaze over. So, you start with a simple system, then it gets more complicated. You need to wheel it back every now and then, sprinkling it back to a simple CRM system again.
Or even a really simple CRM system.
Sorry?
Even a really simple CRM system.
Yeah.
Now we hear you in the double.
We still got the echo?
Yeah. John, it seems that this echo stems from your side.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. What I'll do is I'll mute myself when I've stopped talking.
So there's an interesting question that basically says what you said before is quite interesting in a cloud point of view. So what you said is sales, marketing, and service all in one system, which is pretty much contradicting the cloud value proposition. And basically what happened in the early 2000s is when we moved away from software suites to pillared solutions, best of breed solutions. Pillared is already a bit bad. Yeah. So how do you reconcile that seeming contradiction?
Well, the story of best of breed versus integrated has been around ever since Microsoft rolled out the Office suite.
Yep.
Yep. And when software companies start, they tend to have a single narrow solution. And so they tell everybody that it's best of breed. It's got limited functionality, but hey, it's best of breed. And so, back in the day, you had, I'm trying to remember the name of that word processing package that everybody used. It was WordStar, but what was the other one?
WordPerfect.
WordPerfect. Well, it could be WordPerfect. I think there was another one we used. Anyway, that was the best of breed word processing system. There was Harvard Graphics. Digital presentations. You had CC Mail for your email. You had VisiCalc or 123 for your spreadsheet. These were all best of breed solutions. Microsoft came along and they had actually a pretty good word processor, and they had an okay spreadsheet called Excel, and they had a really crappy presentation system called PowerPoint. But it was all integrated, and then their message was, okay, so it's not as good as the best of breed products, but look at the advantages of integration. And the advantages of integration were really very obvious. So as markets generally mature from best of breed, you could be rude and call them siloed products, into integrated suites.
Why is that rude?
Why is that rude? Well, it's only rude if you're a best of breed player. So, and then what tends to happen is that people like integrated as opposed to interfaced systems. It does make your life easier. So you can have separate systems and you can interface them and integrate them together. But if they're all in the same product, people are prepared to put up with functionality deficiencies for the convenience of having it all in one product. And then what happens is that bit by bit, those suite vendors will make their individual components as good as the standalone products. And so that's what, so we're an example of that. We started off with a sales system, and that was a best of breed sales system. It didn't do marketing, it didn't do mass emails, it didn't do campaign management. Then we rolled out our marketing product, and that did do good campaign management and okay emailing. We've just upgraded that now, and we would say that our emailing designs and our templates and our email editor and our statistics are now as good as MailChimp, which is a standalone email product. But hey, you've got the advantage of having it integrated. So now you've got this product which is as strong as MailChimp, but integrated into your CRM system. Which means that if you're a salesperson, you can look and see which emails your prospects have opened and clicked, or whether they've unsubscribed, and which people within the organization are reading your emails or not. And then as a marketing person, you have something which I just cannot imagine how you would run a marketing operation without, which is that you can see the entire cycle, not just from I've got all these people coming to my website and then some of them convert into a lead, and then I can give the lead to the salespeople, and isn't that wonderful? I've made my lead target. I have no idea what happens after I hand it to the salespeople. I lose visibility from there. Now we can actually, the marketing people can look on and say, okay, this campaign number 36, I converted so many leads. I knew them anyway because they were my leads. And now I can see them going into a pipeline. I can see those 36 leads. I've actually got 12 people that have been qualified that have a value against them, and they're in a salesperson's pipeline. So these are quite good leads. And what's more, they've given a weighted average against each of these, and I can see that those leads, if they close them all, would bring in £56,000. And in fact, if I look a bit further down, I can see they've actually closed 2 of them. They've actually closed them, and I can see some real revenue against this campaign. And what's more, that revenue is more than the cost of the campaign. Hooray!
But interesting enough.
I'm sorry?
Interesting enough is the aspect that we have the perspective that you have asked salespeople what they are utilizing, why they are utilizing it, and you have done a research on that to be 100% sure. And the findings told you some interesting stuff because you have redesigned your product 2019, and it became a completely new approach in design coming from your marketing team. This was when we got contact again, and this was fascinating me because the approach with the product and the new look and feel it looked like something completely new, sexy, shiny, and again, reinventing the make it really simple, smart approach. And I wanted to know the findings out of your research. What did they tell you? What were the needed things where they were looking for to utilize your solution?
So user interface design is fascinating and somewhat subjective. And so any software company is going to get feedback into the design process from multiple sources. You're going to get them back from your customers who are going to say, love your product, but I wish it did this. You're going to get them from people who didn't become customers, who were prospects, who said, well, I loved your product, but it didn't do this, so I didn't buy it. I bought something else. You're going to get it from the marketplace by just looking around and seeing what other people are doing and what they're shouting about, and then you're going to get it from your own personal experience, which in my case was actually using these things over many decades, and particularly trying to work out from a marketing point of view which campaigns were actually working and which ones weren't. So, but the real reason that we changed the user interface was that people were saying your user interface looks old-fashioned. Now, as Ralph will know from our previous shared experience, when customers start telling you that your product is functionally fine, but it looks out of date, that's a big red warning to me. So, and you can say, but it functionally works. It does everything that you want. Oh, hang on, I'm getting a message saying my monitor's going to go off. Okay.
We won't have that.
Okay, we're back. So we redesigned the product, and after the redesign, Ralph said, thank you very much, Ralph. He said it looked shiny and sexy and wonderful. Functionality-wise, identical. But
So really just a cosmetic update? So it was really just a cosmetic update, as simple as that, no change.
Ooh, that's a little sharp. But it was a cosmetic update. Yes, it
We had
was.
to throw in a little controversy. This is too easy.
But Marshall's role is to pull some strings.
And mine is to remind Friendly that we don't want to kill him or grill him, but that we would love to hear that at that time he had no marketing module, not as sophisticated, but he had a very smart utilizing marketing lady, which was also responsible for poking him by time to time for, can't you make it a bit more sexy looking? And we do that campaign and we have that brilliant idea. And couldn't we make it look like what we did in our marketing campaign? And one step adds to another. And then last year, you could go for some more modules and elements.
I need someone like that in my life.
What are the design objectives that you followed when redesigning the UI, UX?
Okay, so there were two steps really in the UI, or two things that we wanted to achieve. One is that we didn't want to lose any functionality, which a lot of systems do. That, you rewrite the product, and it was a rewrite. Every line of, because we also changed the technical stack that it was written in, which I'll talk about in a minute if you're interested. We basically moved away from Microsoft to open source. So the whole thing was a complete rewrite, yet you end up with a product that's has the same functionality as the original product, but a much glitzier user face. But there were a couple of things that we wanted to achieve. One was speed. We wanted the pages to come out much faster than they were coming out before. We wanted a 0.1 of a second is the page delivery that we look for. And there were some things that we thought we could improve from the usability point of view, from the way that data could be added, and you could scroll through the data that we changed within the system. But to be honest, they were minor changes compared to the look and feel, which was just much more slick and much more modern. And as a technologist, you could turn around and say, well, this is just window dressing. You're just making it look pretty. It doesn't do anything more. But from a selling point of view, it's actually quite important because people have a look at the product. And first impressions are very important. And they'll look at the product, and if it looks old-fashioned, people will assume that the functionality is old-fashioned. If it looks modern and glitzy, people assume that it looks modern and glitzy. And you could call that shallow if you like, but that's the world for you. But it is much more pleasurable to use if it looks sexy and shiny. And of course, making it more pleasurable to use will help user adoption.
Okay, but I get the point, and I'm convinced it's right. The sexy, shiny, anyways. The fast response time also. How about number of interactions needed to accomplish any objective? So number of clicks, for example. Was that part of the design objective as well?
Streamlining the process.
Yeah.
We were pretty good with the number of clicks anyway, so there wasn't much improvement that we could see that could be made in that. The improvements that we made later.
John, what was your benchmark when you tell that we were pretty good at that compared to whom or what?
So page speed benchmark is very easy. You can measure that. That's the metric. When we rolled it out, we also needed to make sure that at times of heavy load, because we were growing fast then as we were then, the page response time did not fall off. So we could only see that once you'd actually rolled it out and you've got a couple of thousand people using it at once. It's quite difficult to test that in the lab. But that worked well, as we thought it would do. User interface, it's very subjective. There is no easy measurement. You can't say this scores 5.6 on my sexy user interface scale. So it's very simple. You show it to people and you say, do you like it? Is it better than the last one? So you talk to your existing customers and you talk to your prospects. And when your new prospect stops saying, oh, I like the product, but it looks really old-fashioned, then you know that you have scored.
Okay.
Our harshest criticisms our harshest critics within, for our product is actually our internal marketing team, as Ralph alluded to. So a lot of the design in the marketing product and the design of the product, it actually comes out of the marketing team who are saying, we can't get the emails out the way that we want, and surely our customers would like this feature as well. And again, just because marketing people are much more aware of graphic design. I'm a functionality programmer and designer. I like to see features. I like to see data models, and graphical design is. I've never done graphical design in my life. I've never designed an advertisement. It's not my forte. So it's really good to have people whose background is graphical design within the company to criticize the product and to say how it can be improved.
How about field orientation? Did you do some tests there? So which field to be placed there? And you said simplifying UI in terms of reducing the amount of fields there. So how did you determine which fields to place where and which ones to get out?
Well, that we could do anyway with the old product. So just saying which fields go where and how many fields you should have was not a consideration in this redesign. It was the graphical layout and the color scheme that needed to change.
Okay. But even before that, so you achieved obviously already a pretty good yet outdated design, yeah? Which has quite an optimization for the user in terms of having the right fields and only the right fields at the right place. So in my project experience, I got quite some SAP experience as well. What we try to do several times is do exactly that: remove clutter, remove fields in the product, which even in the product turns out to be incredibly hard. And then in whatever project I am, the customers want to have galore of additional fields on the screen again, which is counterbalancing the whole thing. So how do you balance that?
So what we do is we ship the product out of the box, as it were, the virtual box. When you fire it up and you sign up for a new system, you get the minimal amount of fields that we think that you need. And even then, if you don't want some of them, you can turn them off. But then, I mean, like many products, not just CRM products, we have custom fields. So customers can add custom fields. So customers can add as many custom fields as they like. And that is actually the problem. It's not the default fields that you ship the system with. It's those 24 other fields that if you've got, half a dozen salespeople and a few marketing people, but one of the salespeople wants this field just for them, and the marketing people want these 3 fields. So you end up with this whole pile of fields on the system. And all we can do to stop that is to just keep saying to our customers, keep it simple, spring clean it out. Do you really need all these fields? Are these legacy fields that nobody's using anymore? Can you get rid of them? And then if you really, really do need them, but not everybody needs them, can't you just hide some of them so only the people who want to see them and the rest of the people aren't bothered by them? And please don't make them mandatory.
Yeah,
fully agree.
Turn them on at need.
Yeah, now we come to the user experience. We come back to the already twice asked research you did last year, such as what were the outcomes which surprised you and your marketing team?
You're muted.
Oh,
I do that all the time.
Let's try it with them. That's what happens when you try to be good and mute yourself all the time. So we surveyed our customers and then other people that we could raise, but actually it was mainly our customers who answered. But we have a lot of customers, so that was interesting. And what we were interested in really is how their sales methodology had changed over the last couple of years. There were a couple of things that we were particularly interested in. One was social. Were our customers using social more? That's not me, by the way. And the other one that we were particularly interested in was from a sales process point of view, which is how many times people would try to contact a customer before giving up. And what we found was that, perhaps unsurprisingly, because we thought this would be the case, is that the adoption of LinkedIn as a sales prospecting tool had increased dramatically. An awful lot of people were using LinkedIn for sales prospecting. But the other that we found, but this really was quite geographical dependent, was and also the type of industry that you were in, was how many times salesperson would try to contact an early stage, what I would call a suspect as opposed to a prospect. This is somebody that you know their name and address. Somehow they've expressed some interest in your company, maybe by watching a video or downloading a white paper. You know they ought to be interested, but will they take your call so that you as a salesperson can introduce yourself and ask them what they really want? And so, for instance, we will try 3 times to contact.
3 times.
3 times, yeah. To try to contact a prospect. And then we think if they don't want to be contacted after 3 times, they're not going to want to be contacted, or they'll contact you. But we found that an awful lot of people tried 6 times, which we were surprised about. But it does vary by geography, and particularly in the United States, people will try an awful lot of times to get through.
Okay.
We had an internal conversation about this because we were wondering how many times that we should do this, and we found that in the US and particularly and now in the UK, people erect a lot of barriers to being contacted unannounced, particularly over the telephone. So if you try and call a US and now a UK prospect, then you'll find yourself leaving endless voicemails, which will not be replied, and emails will not be replied. Then we talked to our people in Australia, and it was completely the opposite. And I think this is because there's just a lot less competition in Australia. So people are not being besieged by thousands of CRM vendors or anybody else trying to get through to them. So our sales guy in Australia said, oh yeah, I phone up all our customers, and about half the time I get through first time. They answer the call and they're really pleased to hear from me. Thank you for calling. I'm so glad you called me.
Yeah, I think it's just because they're lonely.
Well, there is an element to that, and lonely or neglected. And if I can't get through to them and I get their voicemail, then I'll leave a message. They call me back. It's like, what?
Well-behaved.
Yeah, they call you back. They say, thank you for calling me. I'm so pleased you called me about the CRM system that I signed up for. You know, I've got these questions. And we're all sitting there with our mouths hanging open saying, you know, you jammy bastard. But the market is much smaller, and there are not so much less CRM. I mean, all cloud CRM vendors are by nature international, but the local support is not there.
So what did you build a strategy around that? A sales strategy around those findings?
No, we didn't change our strategy because it works for each geography, and we think what we're doing works. But we were just interested in learning from our customers what their strategy was. But what a customer's strategy in their industry, selling their product in that geography would be, maybe totally irrelevant to somebody in a different geography and a different product.
Okay, let's get a little back to the engagement of the sales reps. So you said a few things, and that dialed back to a report by Beagle Research end of last year, where they basically said, well, the sales reps rather do a lot of unsavory things before starting to maintain their CRM system, or maintain data in their CRM system. So you said you make it easy for them to use the system, but a bit clearer, what do you think are the real values that the salespeople want to get out of the system? What is the real value they see, or where do they see real value in a system?
And adding the challenging aspect, you switched from Microsoft to open source. Is there a value for your customers as well?
So the technology platform is a different question, really, which I'll come back to, I think, in a minute.
Lovely.
So
first go for Tom's.
I'm sorry?
First go for Tom's question, please.
Let's go for Thomas's question. Actually, I'm not going to do that because I've got the technology one on my mind, so I'll do that first. So we wrote the original product in what's called Classic ASP, which is before ASP.NET, on a Microsoft stack. So it's written in VB script using Internet Server IIS. Although we were using MySQL as the backend database. When we decided to rewrite the product, we got to the stage that we were really fed up with Microsoft. And there were various reasons for this. One was that we thought IIS was slow. And I suppose I came from, the previous company was Just Technology, which was famous for having the fastest web server in the world. So I knew quite a lot about the speed of products like IIS. We found that it was not as responsive as, say, Apache, which is what we use to start with. We use Nginx now. But we found particularly that the Microsoft product worked well within itself, but when you started calling APIs to other products, like for instance, if you wanted to interface to Xero as an accounting product, then it was actually falling over. It wasn't really designed to do that. Now that's a restriction really with ASP, which was an old product by then, and ASP.NET I'm sure would do that a lot better. When we looked at ASP.NET, we didn't really like that very much anyway. But what we particularly disliked with Microsoft was that you have to reboot all the servers every 2 weeks. And if you have 16 servers, that is very tedious, because when it reboots, you've got downtime. Whereas Linux, generally speaking, most updates, it can update itself and it doesn't take the web server down. This is also a limitation with how IIS is working, because IIS is built into the operating system, whereas Apache is an application running on top of the operating system. You can reboot Apache without rebooting Linux. So it was the maintainability and scalability that switched us to open source. And our feeling is still that that's correct, which is that it is a much more efficient product. It's faster, it's leaner. You don't need to reboot it all the time. You can fire up a Linux VM without a thought worrying about, oh, do I have a license for this product or this suite of products on it? It's just very easy. So that was the platform side.
Would this drive also the intention to get more sophisticated link to open source Office products as well? LibreOffice or something.
Yeah, that really. I mean, we were really just interested in the server side, not in the desktop Linux side. We do have people in the company that use Ubuntu and Lime as their desktop instead of Apple or Windows, but that was not so much. There were some other things that we have taken advantage of. Is that in the open source world, there is a huge amount of add-ins and plugins and bits of software. We're just moving from Cake to Laravel. And all of that stuff is just really good. There's a huge variety of stuff out there. It's well supported. But I think it's a bit of a tribal thing. I found Microsoft and open source. You'll find that developers, will belong to either the Microsoft religion or the open source religion. You don't get many people that float between the two.
Yeah. But it's interesting to learn, such as we learned that another friendly chap in Austria was telling us, quite frank, that he used the same open source user interface to create his shiny developed CRM, let's say, interface with the same product Salesforce is used to pimp up his product, which is Lightning, which is open source. And this was the message. So I see there is some advantage if one is smarter and goes or thinks around the corner, where is my customer's benefit? And what I was looking for is, would this also give the customer an extra advantage in money, such as you can make your product fairer priced without the Microsoft stack in the back and sell it more affordable?
So the honest answer is that if the product is well written, it's invisible to the customer what technology stack it's in, what database it runs on, what language. People ask us, what language are you written on? What database are you running on? We say, we'll tell you if you like, but it's irrelevant to you because we're not giving you access to any of that. But the advantages are to us. So the advantages of it being more scalable means that we can have either more customers on the same level of hardware, which saves money for us, but also that it runs faster. So there's an advantage to the customer.
Cool.
And then the fact that it's quicker to develop in and more flexible means that we can get product out faster, which is good for us and therefore good for the customer as well.
Why did you choose to run on your own servers? Basically build your own cloud.
We started off on our own servers, our own physical servers. We had racks of servers in two different data centers, geographically dispersed, so that if one was destroyed, the other one can take over. And we ran that for some time. We got to a certain stage when we were having to acquire and maintain a lot of physical servers. And at that stage, we said, no, this isn't really the game that we want to play. And we moved to Google Cloud. So we moved everything to Google Cloud. And then after a year or two's experience with Google Cloud, you realize, of course, that although Google Cloud in itself was more reliable than one of our data centers by itself, we used to find that our data centers would go down about once every 3 months. An hour or so, which is not good, but that was okay because we had another data center and we had an automatic failover, so it just switched over. So whereas Google will only go down twice a year, but it will go down. And that's happened to us a couple of times. So we realized that, again, even though it's more reliable than having your own data centers, it's not 5 nines.
As we've seen that when Google goes down, it's down. It causes chaos. It's not just you.
And And can you get through to anybody? Have any idea as to when it's going to come back again? Dream on. Forget it. Google does not do customer service.
No.
So what?
Why?
I send you an ad.
They're a technology company.
Hey, at least they're not evil, right?
And people are expensive. You don't want expensive people. We just want your money. We don't want to service. We're a technology company, not a service company. So we've now replicated the whole system on AWS as well. So we have that failover now, so that if Google goes down, we can switch to AWS.
And so the main reason there was you don't like Microsoft.
Well, that's two different things. But we don't like Microsoft as a development platform. Well, yeah, that's why we didn't go for Azure.
Azure as well, right?
We could work. I mean, you can fire up Linux machines under Azure if you wanted to, but the reason that we went for Amazon is that we were told the customer service was better.
Okay.
That was the main reason, and they are probably a market leader rather than Microsoft. But I mean, it could have been Microsoft. But the key message that I really is that you should never have all your eggs in one basket.
Last time when we had a Skype call, I was teasing you on the Brexit issue, and you were at that time already far ahead, and you were quite relaxed. So this is not a topic of you which could get you in any way with this, huh?
I get into a lot of trouble with my friends talking about Brexit because all my friends, most of them will say it's a huge disaster. We should never happen, and the economy will never recover, and it's just all bad news. So, I have a few of my friends, and even some of my relatives, who say the EU is a huge, horrible, monolithic bureaucracy. We are so glad we're turning our back on it, and we can run our own country the way that we want to, without the socialist, bureaucratic, foreign interference. And I get into trouble with both people because I tell them that to the man in the street, it makes no difference whatsoever as to whether we're in the EU or not. They really wouldn't notice. And certainly after a couple of years, I don't think people will notice. Now, I personally voted to stay in the EU, he said quickly. And I think it's a shame that we've left. But I can well believe that in terms of GDP, we could well be better off outside the EU in 5 years' time than within it. Now, the reasons for leaving the EU from the voters' point of view was nothing to do with GDP. It's kind of an emotional, tribal thing. And of course, there are other reasons that you'd want to stay in the EU other than just GDP, which I think are valuable. But in the end, you know, life goes on. And
that's true. Yeah.
As somebody that I don't admire once said, you know, we're still Europeans. We're just not in the European community.
The hour is coming up, so two questions. First, let's get back a little to Michael's interesting question, and then how much time do you have left?
My social life is fairly constrained these days.
Okay, that answers. So.
Such as, would you like the whiskey or the wine to be opened?
Either will be very nice, because what I do have in-house tea, if you can see that, our logo, making CRM simple.
I love that one. Yeah, I need that mug for my collection.
The hint has been not acknowledged.
Yeah. So, what do you think of
that
Gaia X?
If I'd ever heard it before, I could comment.
Okay, so
so
Michael
much.
might want to explain himself.
Yeah. The other question was what you prefer. Who is more open in your perspective, the Google or the AWS services? And Gaia X to become the European wave of activities on getting some new web activities and services as competitors approach to Google and AWS as a European initiative. And unfortunately, the friends of you, which are Britannia rules the wave, hooray, 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 I am afraid they will succeed in their opinion that Gaia X will have a long, long, long journey to go till it gets to a certain point.
Well, I suppose the fact that I've never heard of it doesn't help.
Yeah.
So
Be telling, yeah.
So Google and AWS, different company culture, slightly different products. We have found that the native MySQL implementation of Google runs faster than AWS. Okay. And we find that the web servers are generally comparable, but actually they do different things slightly different, even actually within the database, because the real impact of speed on our CRM system, and I imagine most CRM systems, is not the web server. The web server can handle huge amounts of traffic. It doesn't do very much. Everything is chucked back to the database server. So database performance is key. And we found that the Google database server, the MySQL, their implementation of MySQL, that's as opposed to running up a Linux VM and implementing MySQL yourself, but their MySQL service, MySQL as a service, is faster than Amazon. So our primary database server remains with Google, and our web servers are primarily with AWS.
Charming.
But
they both work.
Gaia X, and having touched Brexit and EU, so in how far is GDPR compliance a topic for you?
GDPR is another lovely topic that
it is. I
can bore people with. A bit like
a nice
Brexit.
simple one.
And it's a big and complicated subject. But let me say, first of all, is that we decided when the Brexit vote happened that we would move all our servers into the EU, because that just solves a lot of problems. So all our database servers from Google and Amazon are all hosted within the EU themselves. Okay. So that satisfies the GDPR data compliance for the EU, and it also satisfies it from the UK point of view.
In how far are you working with encryption in REST and transfer?
Encryption at REST is a problem if you want to do global searches, because you can't, because it's encrypted, and that has a performance issue. So we're not encrypting at REST. What we're doing is that we're encrypting the servers that they're on, so that you can't access them. So we just make sure that security to the actual servers is very robust. The other point with GDPR is that we have some customers who are very hot on GDPR. They are, of course, our German customers, as you would hope.
This comes as a total surprise.
And our Swiss customers. And also any customer that's in a regulated industry, either health or finance. So that accounts for about 5% of our total customer base. The rest of our customer base do not give a fig, as far as I can see. They buy mailing lists, they email people that they have no contact with whatsoever, they do not care where the data is stored, and they've got more things to worry about. Now, this is possibly because a lot of our customers are bloody-minded British people, and also because they're US customers, where the concept of privacy and data protection is just totally alien. So culturally, those two countries are less interested in GDPR and compliance, full stop. The other is because they're small businesses, so they're not big companies, they don't have a compliance officer, they're not really interested in this, they're just trying to make some sales. And if you try to tell them that what they're doing is technically illegal, so sue me. That's it. They're not that interested. Which is a shame, because we put in a huge amount of effort in putting GDPR compliance into the product. We have the marketing system handles opted lists. You have an audit trail, so that if anybody says, why are you emailing me, you can say, well, I'm emailing you because you clicked this button on this date and you opted in overtly into our emails. Well, all of that stuff, people don't use it.
Now we have the good news department. That was something I would love to hear. And now I would ask my next question, which is data quality. How do you manage data quality?
Well, so
We're just beating the hell out of John today, aren't we?
No,
It is, the chap is known to me for several ages. Now, what we had, even if it's financial data, people like to throw around several Excel lists and are surprised that they get a lot of shit or crap. You can name it, you get it.
It's none of those things. Data quality is as good as the data that our customers put in. We cannot improve the quality of the data they have. We can send them nice blogs about cleaning out all your old data, getting rid of the fields that you don't want. The best that we can do for data quality is to try to make sure that the data that goes in is good data. And where does all the data come from? It comes from the salespeople. It doesn't tend to come from anywhere else. Well, and the customer service and support people if they're using our customer service and support module. So it all comes back to the same issue, which is you're going to get good quality data in if the salespeople like using the system and that they don't have to put too much data in. Then you'll get, and that the data that they put in is useful to them. Then you'll get good quality data.
Would you think that a standardized input interface for one of the large list brokers like Dun & Bradstreet, Bisnode, Optimal Server, whatever you have in your mind, would be a sales benefit? Okay.
Did you say list broker?
I say list broker. Dracula, I said list broker.
So, I mean, part of our terms and conditions on our email, our marketing program is that you will not buy lists.
Good.
Now, you can, from a marketing point of view, you can argue as the efficacy of buying lists and how valuable they are. And I'm sure in some industries they are good. My personal experience in buying lists is A, the quality of the list is crap. And secondly, the people on the list are not particularly interested. But it depends on the product that you're selling. Ours is too wide. Of course, when we say that you're not allowed to buy lists, well, actually I should say that you're not allowed to email lists that you bought. You can send physical mail to lists that you bought. That's legal. But both and of course, if you're American, you can do what the hell you like. So, providing you're only emailing Americans, of course. So in the EU, as you know, GDPR, you shouldn't email lists, but you can write to them. And in the US, providing you're not emailing EU citizens, you can do what the hell you like.
What would be your aspect in, is it then very easy to generate your own contact, such as that you have some standard tools in your marketing, let's say module, which makes it very easy to interface to a landing page or some web services, or that it's done very easy if you have a set up website to get the data in, really simple systems?
Yeah, so all the classic ways to gather information, to build your own database, which is basically to have interesting content or subscription services that people need to sign up to gain access. So we have within our marketing suite two facilities, something we call web forms and something we call web transactions. And that that provides the functionality to capture the data directly from a form from your website and put it into the CRM system. And then, depending upon what you want to do, you can then trigger other things that then happen once you have that data. So it can be put in a marketing campaign, it can be put in a drip marketing campaign. The lead can be assigned to a salesperson, depending upon which form they filled in. So all of that's fairly classic e-marketing stuff, and we have that in our marketing.
Yep.
The trick that we do, and I mentioned this, actually this is one of my pet subjects, so I'll talk about this for a second if I'm allowed to,
Sure.
which is that our design philosophy. Since you haven't asked me the question, I'll answer it anyway.
John, what's your design philosophy?
I'm glad you asked me that question. Thank you. Give that man a donut.
My pleasure.
So we had this original idea that we wanted to make CRM simple. So that's one design philosophy, and we call it a mission statement, but our little tagline is that we want to provide everything that a small business needs to run their sales and marketing operations. The word everything is quite wide, but we provide everything that most people would expect to see to run their sales and marketing business. But those expectations change as technology moves on. And in my experience, what tends to happen, and we talked about this earlier with best of breed programs, is that you'll find that new ideas and new technology arrives in these best of breed programs. And that when they first come out, they're very expensive and they're very difficult to configure, and they're not for small businesses. So our design philosophy is we look at what the enterprise products are doing, and we say, that's interesting. I wonder if we could make that simpler and easier to implement and cheaper, and offer it to our marketplace so they could use some of these things, but in a stripped down version, but one that would work for them. So our new automation product is very much on those lines. So marketing automation tends to come from big products with thousands of dollars per month price tags. And in most of those products, you will probably need an external consultant to help you set that system up for you, or you're going to have to pay the vendor a certain amount of money to get it going. Oh, and by the way, you have to pay a year up front, because after 3 months you'll realize that it's not working very well. Put your money back. So it'll take you a year to see payback, which is okay. So we looked at that and we said, well, how can we make that much simpler so that our end users can configure it themselves, so that it's not difficult for us to support, and therefore we can sell it to the customers at a price which is tens of dollars a month instead of thousands of dollars a month.
Show us your select visitor.
Halt sie mal kurz.
Two visitors.
It's
hello.
Hello, Wolf.
And the offender who let her in.
We are on our internal Slack channel. We have a cute pets and animals channel.
Yeah, this is our cute home pet.
Yeah. Also during lockdown, invaluable.
Yeah. Pun?
Yeah.
During lockdown, we've all been locked down here.
Yeah.
Our pets are invaluable.
Yeah, so we have her since beginning of December. So
Really? She looked like she was about 14 years old. Oh, the dog.
The other one is about 13 years old. Yes, 13 and a half. Yeah. 14 is the other girl. Yeah, no, so, but
So
in extension to what you just indicated, so the price tag is one consideration for SMBs. So, and in reflection of the original title of this conversation is, what makes SMBs different? So what do they want different? Why do they want different systems? Do they want them at all?
So smaller companies are different in many ways. The major difference is that they tend to think shorter term. I mean, that's not to be rude, but they're dealing with day-to-day issues of survivability. And making this month's or this year's sales figures, they don't tend to have a 5-year plan, whereas, a large quoted company, would be thinking 5 or 50 years out. So small companies don't do that. So they have a smaller budget because they have less money. They also have shorter timescales. They're looking to get this thing up and running faster because A, they need it, and B, because they don't have the time or the money to spend on a 3-month implementation of getting somebody externally in to get this thing up and running. So pre-cloud, the old CRM implementation, which was the same for any software application, was that you bought the CDs and the manual, and then somebody came around and they installed it on your network and configured it for you. And that whole process, which was divided into 2 parts, there was the installation, which was actually configuring the software to work, and then there was the setup phase, and that would take 6 months or possibly, for a larger implementation, 2 years. They don't have that timescale, so they want something that's up and running fast, works out of the box. They don't tend to have an internal IT department, which is a mixture of a problem and a blessing. So they don't have anybody sitting there saying, is this GDPR compliant? How secure is the data? They just have the sales guy or the sales manager, which is very often the owner of the company, if it's a small company, saying, this is what I need, this is the functionality that I want. Have they got lots of other customers, and are they big names that I recognize? Fine, well, it must be all right then. They're not going to send you a 30-page IT questionnaire, which our larger customers do. And particularly government organizations will ask you all of these questions. They just say, look, if the NHS is using it, if IBM is using it, probably okay. I don't need to ask them any more questions. So, and then the other thing is that they're looking at configuring it themselves. So they won't have a database administrator. They won't have a sales administrator very often. They'll have the head of marketing or the head of sales or the owner will actually configure the software themselves. So it's a much faster and simpler sale from our point of view. So we will offer a 14-day trial, and most of our trialists will be up and running within 3 days, or certainly 5. Whereas if you were implementing Salesforce or Dynamics or something like that, you wouldn't be able to see what the system was like when it was finished for 3 months or more.
And so, if you do not misuse it, you get service help, such as to get your lead list or your Excels imported.
So we found that the biggest problem for our trialists in trying to trial the system is getting their data uploaded. Most of our customers have never done a data import before. They've never had to jiggle their spreadsheet to get the columns in the right order or to get the fields correct. This is not something that they've done in their lives before. They're not IT people. So just to short circuit that, we just say, look, just send us the spreadsheet, send us your data, and we'll load it for you. Within the trial, there's no charge for that. And we can do that because we know that if they've got that far and they're happy to send us their data, they're probably going to buy anyway. But also, it's easy to use, so it doesn't take us long to load the data. And that's part of the service.
It gets them over the biggest obstacle to adoption. That's the big thing that you do.
It's a heart opener, yeah? Such as you take one of my paints.
Yeah, and once the customer sees their data in the CRM system, it becomes their CRM system. And you've got
Hallelujah.
You've got an emotional buy-in. Look, I can see my data. I recognize this data. Yes, this makes sense. It's in the right place. I can see what I can do with it. It's very emotional.
Very plain and frank asking, what does one have to pay to have the sexiness of sales, service, and marketing from your end, month by month per user?
Well, you can start with nothing at all because we have a free edition. And we have a lot of customers using our free edition. And the free edition, it will give you the sales system, not the marketing or customer service support. It'll give you the free system up to 100 companies that you're dealing with. you will get the same software and almost the same level of support that you would get with the paid-for versions. And we've styled the free system in that it's capable enough to last a startup for their first year.
Yep.
So 2 users, 100 companies. That will give most people all they need for a year without suddenly finding that they have to upgrade because they run out of room or they need some functionality.
But
Thomas,
you should answer the
Unmute, right?
the next bits and pieces, such as if I want to have to compare it to some of the rest of the market, I want to have sales, service, and marketing. The full bloom. What's on the bill month by month?
So it's per user pricing, but if you said, for example, a 5-user system and you wanted all the functionality that we offered, we have 2 levels of marketing and the CRM, then you're probably talking off the top of my head at about $200, euros, pounds, it's about the same these days, a month.
Hmm. What's the
Seems
conversion
reasonable
rate
to
from
me.
the free tier? Curious.
I'm sorry?
What's the conversion rate from the free tier? If you can disclose that. So
Yeah, no, I can disclose it. It's not that high, really. I mean, we have people using the free system that have been using it for 10 years, and they've never seen the need to upgrade. It's probably something like 5%. I don't actually know, to be honest, because we don't measure it. But what I do see, which is interesting, is people who started off with a free system, and then, perhaps rather cruelly, we say that if you haven't used it for 6 months, we'll delete it. We'll send you emails, but then we'll delete it. Otherwise, you end up with zillions and zillions of little systems. And you get people coming back and say, oh, I had a free system from you 2 years ago. I really liked it. Can I have a full system now?
Oh, that's cool. Can't get any better.
Yeah.
Marshall, you had a question too, and I talked over you. Sorry.
No, I was telling you you were muted.
Ah, okay. I overcame that objective. Or that
Happy to be of service.
Yeah.
So, John, what would you like to ask us? Because, John, feel free to ask us questions before we close.
So one of the questions on my mind is AI. There's lots of noise about AI. Mainly noise, as far as I can see. I just pulled up to get the terminology right, the Gartner hype cycle. And I reckon that we are only at the beginning of the inflated expectation curve. We have yet to hit the top of that, let alone the trough of disillusionment. But I can see that that's where we're going. Also, with a technology like AI, you can call anything AI that you wouldn't have called AI before. So lead scoring, which is something that we're just about to roll out, you could call that AI. Why not? It's what quite a few people are calling AI, which isn't even pattern recognition. It's just maths, and then there's pattern recognition, and then there's machine learning, and then there's serious AI. So we're beginning to see CRM systems that say they have AI within it. And I can see that this will be useful, particularly for 2 areas. One is for lead scoring. Rather than you working out how to score leads, the machine will work out how to score leads. But that will only work if you have a lot of data. And we played with the idea of, okay, well, that's okay. This customer only has a little bit of data, but we have lots of customers. So we can use aggregated data to try and solve their problems for them. But then you think about it and you say no, because this customer's in Venezuela and they're selling washing machines, and this customer's in the United States and they're selling nuclear reactors, and it's probably a different sales cycle.
A bit.
Yeah, so it's not going to work. So you do need lots of data. There are probably some things that we could do with emails as to what would help, would enhance engagement with marketing emails, because that is, I think, fairly common across multiple sectors. So I'm interested so answering your question is, what's my question to you? My question to you is, where do you see AI going in CRM terms, both the hype and the reality?
Well, I think we've already seen a lot of the hype. As you say, you can call almost anything AI now that you never would have. If it has an algorithm in it, if it's got any kind of math behind the scenes, one could argue that it's artificial intelligence. And there's also the fact that a lot of people don't really have a grasp of what artificial intelligence can and can't do. A lot of us are still working under the science fiction idea that this is going to take our jobs because a smart computer is able to do everything a person can. It can't. There are still people who think that, and once we get them past that, that'll be fine. I've seen AI doing reasonably good work in predictive analytics and predictive sales technology, not being used for sales directly, but as a tool that a human individual has at their disposal, providing either next best action or calling up documents in the midst of a conversation to help the sale go more smoothly. That's one place I see it going, where it really already has gone. Something that you just said, and I don't remember the specific words you just said, but it inspired me with something. It had to do with marketing. What I would love to see is the end of do not reply email addresses. Put artificial intelligence hooked up to email so that you can reply to those automated messages and get something out of them, even if it's just being rerouted to a human once it has been assessed properly. And again, that might not technically count as AI. That might just be a sorting algorithm. But
for service reason, it's very sexy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a place where it's not being used, and it really should be. And if anybody's listening who wants to do that, it's my idea, and I will very happily sell you the IP.
So it's pretty much the same here. So where the values that seem to come right now are within scoring models for leads and predominantly opportunities. So there we are talking about, well, at the end, a type of predictive analytics, but using the confined area of machine learning. Yeah, so we are talking point solutions there right now. So there is no general AI, period. Yeah? And HAL will not be there anytime very soon. Yeah? So it's about solving specific solutions via data and learning solutions. The opportunity scoring and the finding of contacts, the identifications of contacts to talk to when it comes to improving the odds of the sale succeeding. This is on the sales side. On the service side, what we have is pattern analytics, actually, image analytics, and routing of tickets to the right agents with the right skill sets based upon text analytics, which is another working AI. Yeah. So, well, marketing, we have lead analytics. You already mentioned it. Yeah. So these are the main things, and that probably combined with not only with internal data but also with external data. This is where, for example, an acquisition of Node AI came from. They're dealing with lots of external data, which enriches internal data, which apparently helps in significantly improving the prediction for success. So this is where we are at right now. Point
And
solution.
when you then also include free available sources following the good old open source idea, you find grabbers and searching machines like Justny in Germany, which gives you complete profiles which are open to the public and make them integrated into your CRM after a certain validation. And the larger idea I do have is that if we see the digital workplace, which is now a fact, but it has to be established in a more proper way, there we will have a lot of use for artificial intelligence, bits and pieces. If it's in the document management, if it's in some pattern recognition of fraud attacks, or if it's in these areas. And CRM is a very important part of that. If it's called customer experience or CDP or the hushi, yeah. But the real thing is, if we see it not as Zweistein, Dreistein, or Vorstein, but we see it as something useful, and we see it integrated in what makes life easier to serve our customers better, then we're on the right track, and the next hell may come. John, I'm afraid I can't allow this.
This is also what Michael says here in his secret language named German. So it only helps if the decision makers can and do trust the results that the AI delivers,
and not their gut feeling,
which has two preconditions basically. One is, well, there needs to be a kind of an explainability. Why did the prescription at the end of the day get there? Why is this the prescription as opposed to the other one that my gut tells me? And the other one is learning over time, or via training the machine, that proves that the predictions are fairly accurate, and more accurate than, well, better than average, far better than average, basically.
So I like the idea that AI is an augmenter. It augments the decision process, but doesn't replace it. One of our customers a few years ago was the IBM Watson team, who used our CRM when they were first setting up. Well, they had Watson and they were beginning to sell it, so they used our CRM system from head office to prospect for it. And we spent a lot of time talking to them. They were quite keen to see if we could interface our CRM into IBM Watson, which was an interesting idea. But the story that they told me, which I thought really makes sense, was that it's being used a lot in cancer diagnosis in the medical profession.
Yeah.
And what the customer, the doctor, valued was that the doctor would look at you, would work out what they thought were the diagnosis, or possibly the three problems that you might have, and IBM Watson would suggest a fourth, which you hadn't thought of.
Yeah, fair enough. And in this integration, if you have an automated diagnosis system which is sitting aside of the patient at home and can diagnose by the analysis of your coughing that you have COVID and not some a normal cough, that is also a process which some German companies financed out of British money, CarePass, for instance, is servicing and providing. Yeah? I have the pleasure now, after you have had your chance, to ask us something that I'd love to wrap up it, if nobody else is objecting. John, I hope you liked it. Our audience definitely did like it.
That was really good fun.
Yeah.
And
glad to have
thanks for being here.
Yeah, we liked it too. Thanks a heap.
I could go on, but as you say, we have to wind up.
Well, we probably take the chance of doing a follow-up.
Of course.
That's even better option.
The cocktail party list is pretty short right now.
Yeah.
So I would like to end the broadcast, but please stay with us for a minute, John.
Thanks for listening, guys.
See you.
Goodbye, world.
So, now
We're still live.